Hello and welcome to another AGD tutorial, and in today's episode we are back in the world of Ultimate's Atic Atac, and we're going to be looking at how we can use objects, control them, and create some doors which randomly open and close just like the real game. So first of all, as always, we're going to go into code which is already running and think about the kind of things that we have to implement to make this possible. So let's go into the code now and have a look at it. The first thing that we should consider, of course, is that the doors need to spawn and indeed unspawn, so to speak, to be added and removed. The next thing we should consider is that they are in the correct place, because of course, for example, here the doors are to the north and the east, whereas in the other room they are to the south and to the east. We also need to consider that the player must not be allowed to pass through the door, and as you can see here, we also need to make sure that the player doesn't get trapped in a door when it closes. I believe in the original game this happened, and I don't really want that to happen because in the game it was just an annoyance, frankly, so I think we should try to do without that. So those are all the things that we need to consider. Make sure that the doors spawn in the right place. For example, here we don't want one to the north, and they open and close, and that they affect the player in the right way. So let's move over to another version of AGD where I haven't done this code yet, and we'll look at how to implement it. Okay, so here we are in an earlier version of the game before the object doors have been implemented. So let's begin by taking a look at the graphics themselves for the doors. We're going to use 4 objects from object 0 to 3, and here they are. You can pause the video anytime, of course, if you want to copy these. They are 16 by 16 pixels, and we have one for the north, one for the east, one for the south, and one for the west. Now, normally these objects you'll set them to start at 255, which means off screen. And I've just noticed there that one of them is set to 254, so I'll change that. You use Q and W to make those changes. So we'll start them at 255. If you want to check how the graphic looks on the screen, you can press P. There are videos. I know that Paul's done a video about placing objects, so please watch that if you're not sure about how to work with these. But I'm just doing this to check the position of the object, that it fits and it looks right, and I'm quite happy with that. It looks exactly as it should. So I'm going to place these objects using code rather than placing them into the game from within the editor here. So let's look at the next step that we need to think about, and that is how can we tell if there is a space for the door or not. Obviously in some of the screens there is only a door to the east or to the south and so on, and the way I do that is using custom blocks. I think I've already set this one up in a previous video, so if we have a look at the block data now, you can see there I've got this custom block here. It's completely blank at the moment. I actually have 2 control blocks, you may remember. As well as these door colors, I also have a black on black block which we use to hide the object, the sprite generator, let's say. What I'm going to do then here is I'm just going to put a nice letter C here on the block, and this is going to allow me to see it on screen and obviously show you where it is. And as you can see here, I have got these blocks in the doorways here. So in this case I've got them on the east and the south door, and here I've got one on the west, and so on. So that is basically going to tell the code, is there a door or not? So if it checks, for example, here for a door to the west, it won't find one and it won't generate any code. So over here, for example, it won't generate a door. So we'll use a little bit of code to detect that. So let's begin then. We're going to start. Obviously, I'll wipe this away first, and then we will look at how we generate a single door. We'll start with just one door, and we'll use object 0 to do this, so a door on the north wall. So we'll go into the player code, and we'll look at generating a random number to spawn, shall we say, this particular object. So we'll start in here, and as you can see, this is our original code for moving the player about, and we'll put the code into here. The first thing we need to do is set A and B. This is the variables I normally use to store the player X and Y value. The reason we're going to do that is we're going to basically move the player to check each door and see if it's available. And obviously once it's done that, we need to restore the player's position back to what it was before. So we'll start with the random number generator. We'll generate a number between 0 and 29. That's about the right balance I've found. And we'll check if it is a value of 1. Again, arbitrary number, could be anything. This is a 1 in 29, 1 in 30 chance. Okay, so here we'll set the X value of the player to be 8 and the Y value to be 80. And that is the north wall where the door should be. I'll now detect object, and I'm checking here to see if the door is already there, and the code will then respond to that and remove the door if it's there, and if it's not there, then it needs to check if it's possible. So here we can see if the object is 0, then take the object. So in other words, if you've got an object, if the door is there, take it away. If it's not there, then check for a custom block. Obviously then it will know that there is a doorway. So in other words, if custom means is there a doorway there, and if there is a doorway there, put a door in place. Okay, so we'll just add a couple of end ifs into here to round it off, and if we now just check that that is okay, there it is, the code looks fine. And so all we need to do now is go back and make sure that that it's working. But of course we mustn't forget to restore the player's coordinates, which I already mentioned. So let's put that into there now. Okay, let X A, let Y B. So as you can see at the top, we start with the player coordinates being recorded up here, and then we restore them down there. That of course is very important, otherwise the player will just jump to the and be stuck on the north wall at those coordinates there. Okay, so we detect the object, and then we say, is there a door there? And if there is, take it away. Otherwise, is there a doorway there? And if there is a doorway, put a door in place. So let's now run the code and see what happens. And in here, of course, nothing happens, and that's good because there's no north wall. If we go into here, and there we go, we've got the door randomly appearing and disappearing there, just pretty much as we want. Obviously you can change the number 30 if you want it to happen more often or less often. You can play with those numbers. But as you can see, we do have something else we need to think about, because the player can pass through the door completely and is not prevented from going to the next room. So it's basically a ghost door right now, and no use to anyone really. So let's look at how we code that now. What we want to do basically is tell the code that if the player encounters that door, stop him from moving up. And this will mean that when the door is spawned, the player can still move down, and can still move away from the door, but they won't be able to go through to the next room. So we'll go down to the code here where we control the player movement, the player up movement, and we will add another detect object here. So we're checking here to see if the player is touching the door. So if object equals 0, and obviously we want it to do nothing if he's touching the door. So we'll put an else in here and an end if in here. So what that means is, if the player's touching the door, don't let the player move up. Otherwise, let the player move up, because there is no door. So we don't need to put any code in there for the actual door itself, but when it's detected. But when it's not detected, we'll allow the player to move. So let's go into the code again, take a look, wait for the door to close and see if we can go through it, and there you go, exactly what we need. And when the door's open it's fine, and when it's closed, yeah, great. So that's exactly what we need to have the door working as it should, so all looking very nice. The next thing then, of course, is to look at implementing the rest of the other 4 doors. So we'll go back into the code again, we'll go into the player code, and we'll look at how we implement that code. We're going to generate another random number basically, and this time we'll decide which door we want to open or close. So what we'll do here then is we'll basically generate a second random number in here from 0 to 3 to choose which of the 4 walls that we want to change. So we'll set the x to be 8 and the y to be 80 by default. That will be if rand equals 0, and then we'll check here. If rand equals 1, we will let x 80, let y 152, which will be the east wall. If the rand equals 2, then let x equal 152, and up here we already have y set to be 80, so that's the south wall. We don't need to check for rand 0, as I said, because we can set that as the default setting. This just saves on code. And then we'll here for the west wall, let x equal 80 and let y equal 8. Now, as you know, the object numbers are 0 to 3, so we can actually use the random number to detect the object and check which one is correct. So in other words, if obj equals rand, if the object is the same as the random number, then take it away. In other words, if you're on the east wall, take away the east door, and so on. And then again we'll check if do you have a doorway, then we will put the correct door in the correct place. So in other words, it basically runs through the code and runs the same code but for all 4 doors. We'll just delete the original code here, and I think that's the correct number of end ifs. We'll just we'll compile it and go back and check. But basically, yeah, because the random number is 0, 1, 2 or 3, we can apply it to the object 0, 1, 2 or 3, which makes the code a lot more efficient, and it's quite short and fairly straightforward really. And we only need to change the coordinates of the doors according to their positions. And as we can see here, everything looks fine. We've got the right number of end ifs in place, so we can now go back and run the code and see if it works. Let's try that now. Okay, we'll just Control A and let's run the code and let's have a look. So we'll just wait for a minute, and there you go. So definitely we've got the east and the south doors working. Let's just have a little run around and check that everything is working here. That's the north door, that's definitely working as well. So we'll wait for this east door to open, and we'll pop through. Oh, and of course we haven't coded the movement yet for the doors. They're not locking, so to speak. They're still ghost doors. Only the north one has been coded, hasn't it? So didn't need to wait for the door to open really. Alright, so as we can see, each room is working fine. The doors are spawning randomly, and the only thing then that we need to implement now is to make sure that these doors stop the player from moving. And we already know how to do that because we've already done it for the north wall. So all that really remains for us to do now then is to go back into the code and go down to the key controls in here and make the changes accordingly. So here we can see we did detect object, and if object equals 0, do nothing, otherwise let the player move up. So I'll now go through the code and add the appropriate conditions to each of these. So in here we'll detect object again. Well, in fact, actually, I think what we'll do, rather than do that, just to make it a little bit easier, we'll actually detect the object at the start, so we only need to detect the object once. That will also save us a bit of code. So if object equals 1, do nothing, and then we'll go through, go down to the next part, and obviously we need an end if in here, and then we'll do the same thing again, and we'll go down. So this one is object 3, and again put an end if in here. Yeah, so rather than detect the object within the key, we'll actually just detect it before we do the check for all the keys, and that way we only have to detect it once. And obviously that again is a little bit more efficient. Okay, so only one more to do. Let's put that one into there, and we'll add an end if, and let's just check the code. We'll now compile it. Everything looks okay. Compile the code, and we'll see what happens. And we'll run it, and the player can move left and right, and oops, can you spot the deliberate mistake? Did you spot it? If you go back here, you'll see I missed out an else for the movement down. So just wanted to keep you all on your toes there, and hope you spotted that. Let's move down to key 2. If we scroll down, we will add an else into the code here. So we've got an else here, and we've got an else for key 1. If we look down here, you may have noticed, if you were eagle-eyed, I didn't put an else in key 2. So just keeping you on your toes, everyone. Right, let me put an else command into here, and that will pretty much do it. So by adding this command in, now we will make sure that the player can move when the door is open. Okay, so looking through, pretty sure now that we have got everything that we want for these doors. So yep, we can see here the doors are generating randomly. That's all fine. Can I go through this door? Well, I can certainly go through that one, but let's check if it will let me go through this door here. We'll just wait for a moment for it to close. Okay, well that's good. We know that one works. Can't get through there. Always good to be thorough, just checking everything. Okay, that one definitely works. No problem. And we already know that they're good. That's good. So the west one works. We know the north one already works fine. There you go. Definitely no problem. So I think we've checked them all really, and everything is fine. There's no reason to think that they won't work. I think that is pretty much it really. I think let's just wait for this door to open. We'll go through, and that one definitely works, and yep, all good. Great. Okay, well I think we will call it today then for this video. We can see we've managed to get everything up and running. The doors work, and they behave exactly as they should. So feel free to have a play about with the random numbers, play about with the graphics. That's all part of the fun. Keep enjoying AGD, keep enjoying the spectrum, and I will see you anon. Thanks a lot. Bye.